This video is sponsored by Manta Sleep. 007 games are usually pretty good, especially the Pierce Brosnan ones, and especially when compared to most of the licensed games they came out alongside of. It's easy to forget now, but EA's Bond run was prolific, and if you saw Brosnan's handsome mug on a case, you could count on it being a solid game at worst. Thankfully, his face isn't on the 007 racing box. Around 2006, EA were meant to make a Casino Royale game that didn't come together and never released, so the 007 rights were sold to Activision, while EA shifted their strategy away from licensed games, going into the new gen of consoles. EA had Brosnan for most of his run, and now Activision would have Craig. Activision's games weren't as close to the cutting edge as EA's generally were, and 007 as a video game brand seemed to lose momentum the further away from GoldenEye 64 it got, but Activision's first 3 games remained solid enough. Quantum of Solace in 2008 was a decent Call of Duty style Bond game considering its rushed development. Bizarre Creations' Bloodstone was closer to Uncharted and is the best of the bunch, but it didn't sell well, partly because they released it at the busiest time of the year, and bafflingly, on the same day Activision released their solid if unremarkable Wii remake of GoldenEye, which would get a higher definition port to PS3 and 360 a year later. I have videos on each game if you're interested. GoldenEye Wii was developed by the British dev Eurocom, who'd made a handful of quality Bond games before this. The World Is Not Enough on N64, 007 Nightfire, a classic, and Quantum of Solace's PS2 port. They also made an NES game for James Bond Jr. in 1991, but you know. With Bond games under their belt, Eurocom was set to develop 007 Legends to coincide with and celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Bond films in 2012. Skyfall did the same thing, which is why it's filled with nuggets of Bond's nostalgia, but 007 Legends is far more direct about its connections to the past and far less successful. Oh dear, this game could put you to sleep. And to help with your sleep, this video is sponsored by Manta Sleep. Manta Sleep are committed to helping you get better sleep so that you can be at your best every day, which you'll need to be to get through bad video games. Their masks are comfy, portable, and they'll have one that suits you, whether it's the standard, pro, steam, cool, weighted, sound, which has its own Bluetooth headphones, or silk mask. They're all carefully crafted and designed for optimal sleep. I got the Manta Silk Mask, which is perfect for my sensitive skin, and opening it up, I was taken aback by how smooth and comfy it feels. It has that premium quality to it. It's easily adjustable, and wearing it, it does an amazing job of blacking out absolutely everything. It's great for your nightly sleep, but also for that afternoon nap, and especially on planes, being someone who flies a lot, I can manage my sleep schedule way easier. So click my link in the description and use code minimme for 10% off your purchase so you make sure you get a good night's sleep. 007 Legends pays homage to our suave British spy by remaking 6 of his films into the one 5-hour FPS campaign. That is, one film for each actor. Goldfinger, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, naturally. Moonraker, License to Kill, Die Another Day, which is the only Brosnan game that didn't have its own tie-in game at the time, and of course Skyfall, which would release as a free DLC episode about a month after Legends came out. Daniel Craig is the only Bond in this game though, because replacing Brosnan in GoldenEye Wii wasn't enough apparently. Finally we got to see him replace every Bond. It's likely a licensing thing, or Eon's decision, you know, the license holders, so this presents as a sleek modern reimagining, while also keeping an anachronistic foot in the past, especially with the non-Bond casting and likenesses, as many of them remain unchanged. We get to see Diana Riggs Tracy alongside Daniel Craig, which feels very wrong. We get to hear Dame Judith Olivia Dench CHDBE FRSA say the name Holly Goodhead.
The CIA confirmed that their agent Dr. Holly Goodhead is still missing.
She's such a professional. Daniel Craig doesn't grace us with his voice here, even though he did in GoldenEye Wii, and even though they put his name in the opening credits because of his likeness, which is a little bit cheeky. It also lists the late Richard Kiel as Jaws, which I like because Jaws doesn't say a single line. Kiel did do an interview to promote the game though, and hey, getting all these old likenesses back is great, and the cast that did return to do their voices as well is impressive. Rory Kinnear and Naomi Harris are listed alongside Dench, but beyond that, Kerry Lowell, Toby Stevens, and even the late Michael Lonsdale reprised their old roles. It had been 33 years since Moonraker came out, and amazingly, Lonsdale came back for Hugo Drax. I know that none of this means anything to your average non-Bond nerd, but it's good fan service, as is the decent intro sequence and its GOLDFINGER instrumental cover. Longtime Bond writer Bruce Fierstein is credited for the script here, and you can argue about the quality of his Bond writing. GoldenEye Wii wasn't especially well written, but still, on paper, this game had a lot of promise. Longtime Bond dev, longtime Bond writer, an ambitious and compelling concept, a returning cast. Even Activision, up until this point, had done a serviceable job with 007, and yet something felt off. The graphics look dated, and Activision had all these great selling points, but they were suspiciously quiet with their marketing, which was extra weird because they went overboard marketing GoldenEye Wii. As the story goes, Eurocom only had 24 months to make this, 24 months that didn't go smoothly. Eon are famously difficult to work with, and Activision pushed to get the game out for the 50th anniversary before their 007 deal expired, and presumably before both Skyfall and that year's Call of Duty released. Also, much like how EA signaled their exit from the movie game business years before, Activision themselves made a statement to Kotaku in 2013 about their own strategic distancing from licensed games. A lot of big publishers were doing the same at the time. Everything must feed into the Call of Duty machine, and if you look at all the Activision licensed games from around then, 007 Legends included, most of them were clearly rushed out the door and completely bombed. Mix in an incredibly ambitious concept and a developer that had made smaller in-scope games up until this point, and it's not hard to piece together why 007 Legends didn't work out. So in hindsight, it's no surprise 007 Legends wasn't hugely marketed, and while it isn't a very good game, it's probably not quite as terrible as its red metascore might suggest. It just leans more on the bland and repetitive side. At times, it's very rushed, at others it's completely mind-numbing, and you can feel the crunch behind it. Just getting the game finished was clearly a far higher priority than making sure it was fun or polished. When I first started writing this script, I called the game uninspired rather than bland, but I backspaced that because uninspired isn't quite the right word. 007 Legends isn't lacking in inspiration, and while it's tempting to tirelessly drag the game for all its badness, which we'll be doing a lot of, there are nuggets of untapped potential here. Interesting little attempts at things, as 007 Legends earnestly tries to pay homage to the legacy of a franchise that I love so dearly. So let's discuss that legacy, and let's pick apart each film's weird, bad Call of Duty clone adaptation. The game opens with a recreation of the Skyfall scene where Naomi Harris accidentally shoots Bond, which would have been a tad confusing considering this game came out before Skyfall, and the rest of the game seems to be set in a hallucinatory flashback while Bond is underwater. It's an unusual framing device because you're not sure if any of it happened or not, and really you forget that this is even a thing after this, except for when each episode has this weird, short, echoey, watery cutscene transition. I almost forgot to mention that this is a thing. Bond wakes up in a hotel room, you walk forwards for a few seconds and see the classic gold-painted girl on the bed. This doesn't at all resemble the hotel room from the film, mind you, as 007 Legends doesn't go for set recreations as much as it does modern reimaginings, and Bond answers a ringing phone. M tells him to track down our gold-hoarding villain GOLDFINGER, and the title sequence plays. The ratio of loading screen to game so far feels close to even up until this point. In a way, 1964's GOLDFINGER is the quintessential 007 movie. It's the third film, and it's where what would become a lot of 007's structure and tropes were established. A pre-title sequence mini-adventure, a whole bunch of cheesy one-liners, an eccentric, gambling, well-spoken villain with grand plans, Aston Martin car chases, the works. Because of this, it still feels very modern and fast-paced, barring some very dated moments, and for me, it's a very watchable comfort food popcorn film window into some 60s culture. It's an insight into fashion and beauty standards, and then contemporary architecture and how some beautiful parts of the world looked at the time. Of course, there's also the fun, iconic Bond moments strewn throughout too. Big shoes to fill for 007 Legends. After our title sequence, we're thrown into this airfield level and told over the phone to find proof Goldfinger is smuggling gold and to stay undercover. Bond promptly sends a plane crashing using some sort of super EMP on his phone, everything explodes, and finally you get to start shooting. So much for being undercover. The sensitivity and acceleration is nuts on console. It feels all wrong, the frame rate hurts, and I'd play this on PC, but that port is absolutely awful. So the first thing you'll do is go to the settings menu and try to sort something out here, but it never quite feels right. If it looks like I'm bad at aiming, I probably am to some degree, but it's the game, I swear. I had to abuse the snap to target aim down sights thing for basically every kill. If it also looks like this has nothing to do with Goldfinger, you'd be right, this really doesn't mirror anything from the film, and it doesn't for the next 15 to 20 minutes, where you're trudging through what comes across as a cut level from the GoldenEye remake. Ever since Facility in GoldenEye 64, it's been mandated that every Bond game afterwards must have bloated levels that feel like Facility, and here we get some standard stealth bits and scanning for objectives with Bond's Sony Xperia. It wouldn't be Bond without product placement, and it wouldn't be an Activision Bond without using your phone to do everything. Soon after, we meet Pussy Galore after seeing her chat with Goldfinger, and yes, that is her name. She's very tall, if we're meant to believe we're seeing the game through Bond's eyes, and because the writers needed to cram so much of the film's exposition into short, quick conversations, if only they used the last 20 minutes of not Facility more efficiently, it's only natural that these conversations are incredibly awkward. Cue the Oblivion meme music.
What is Goldfinger doing with a shipment of nerve gas?
I don't know. I don't know anything about nerve gas.
We're also treated to the worst Bond introducing himself moment I think this franchise has ever seen.
By the way, I didn't catch your...
James Bond.
Clean for dinner.
Truly iconic. I'm not sure if this line is a glitch, I'm not sure what happened here, but I played through the game twice for this video and it happened both times. Whatever the reason, it was likely put together in a rush, much like the following scene in Goldfinger's office, vaguely representing the war room on his farm, only this time rather than it being inventive and fun, you just go around doing exposition things with your phone. At least the pool table flips to reveal Fort Knox, which we end up assaulting after being captured and treated to a much lower energy version of the I expect you to die scene.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die.
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
And we're back to bland firefights, though at least this time it's actually somewhere from the film, until you go inside and it isn't, it's Facility again, and that's kind of the thing with this Goldfinger level, like, it strikes on some of the most important bits from the film, and it has some of the most important characters, including a quick-time event battle with Oddjob, who you might recognize as that annoying hat-throwing character your cousin would always pick on the N64, but the execution of these big moments are clumsy at best. There's no richness or excitement or intrigue or subtext to be found, and even if they were better, the long stretches of Facility between them would drag them down. They leave you wondering why the Goldfinger movie's other action scenes weren't adapted. We close out the episode with the plane scene from the film, which only goes for about a minute. Galore loves Bond now after the oh-so-romantic 2 minutes they spent together earlier. Goldfinger goes out the window in a weirdly humorless QTE sequence, Bond climbs his way to the cockpit, and the episode just sort of ends with its usual abrupt whiplash. Frankly, I think this Goldfinger episode is the worst of the bunch. It never threatens to capture the beauty of the film, it can't seem to decide if it's campy or gritty, and 007 Legends starts with its worst foot forward. Only up from here, right? 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service is an unusual Bond film, and not really because it's Lazenby's only film, though that's part of it. If Goldfinger established conventions, On Her Majesty's Secret Service plays with those conventions. Where most films have Bond globe-trotting, this one's almost entirely set in and around Blofield's snowy mountaintop lair, and where most would be littered with action scenes, OHMSS, let's call it OMS, is more ponderous. At times it's psychedelic, at others it's subdued, and at one point it turns into a goofy sex comedy. It's all rather offbeat compared to the usual affair. At the time it wasn't well received, and since then it's been re-evaluated far more positively, and I tend to love it too. There's a central romance between Lazenby and Diana Rigg's Tracy that's dynamic and personal, and their chemistry is unlike anything else in the series, where their characters are afforded more vulnerability and depth. Also, this film is just gorgeous. The action is timeless, the car chase especially is stunning, as is the assault on the base at the end with the sunset and the helicopters. It pays off so fantastically. And then there's 007 Legends, which of course doesn't capture this magic. I don't think this game will be re-evaluated positively in 50 years, but it does start to shape up a little bit. You can start to see the potential here. After about 5 seconds of leisurely skiing with Tracy, we threaten to have a genuine quiet moment before the evil snowmobile guys attack and you gotta follow her down a hill, but you'll hit a bunch of trees and have to restart over and over because you're constantly fighting against a game that's trying to auto-steer you down its desired path. It's awful, but it's short and it is a shot of life for a game that's basically been bad facility up until this point. It's not hard to imagine what the good version of this scene looks like because the good version is basically the snowmobile chase in Modern Warfare 2. After being engulfed by an avalanche, Blofeld takes Tracy away in a chopper, and you're thrust into the final assault, a scene that starts over 2 hours into the film. It's kind of like playing someone's distant memories of OMS, you know? It's like, I think Bond goes skiing or something in the middle, I think there was an avalanche, but how about that final battle? We open with a sniper and a turret sequence circling the base. As usual, it's 0 to 100 in a second, but the aesthetics and the visual design here are a little bit more thoughtful and striking, you know? They've made the lair bigger, more modern, more imposing. You land and you continue the usual bland, chaotic COD shooting up and into the lair and down into its bedrooms for a night vision sequence where you find Tracy and she drops the most efficient exposition dump yet.
Blofeld is going to blackmail the UN. He's brainwashed 5 women and programmed them to release something called the Omega virus in the world's largest cities, unless he gets paid off.
Yep, that's the entire plot. Curious that she doesn't need night vision goggles too. We then find our way into the underground Blofeld base of operations, where you stealth or fight through some appropriately old-fashioned cavey lair design before hack mini-gaming stuff in his office using your phone for more exposition. Again, doing this becomes a bit of a theme. Unlike Goldfinger, there's at least some setup and payoff to this mission. You know, you fly around the base, which sort of serves like an establishing shot, like here's the building you're assaulting, and then you make your way inside, revealing its depths. There's more structure, it looks nice, it's just let down by a lack of meaningful storytelling and the endless pile-on of enemies, explosions, and clumsy shooting. Like, slow down for a second, give me a chance to breathe. We fight Blofeld on a cable car in another scene that looks better than it plays. This is a good time as any to mention the slapdash melee system that's basically a series of simple QuickTime events. Unfortunately, most boss battles are a mix of these and regular QuickTime events. I don't think they got Telly Savalas's likeness here, but Blofeld is well modelled regardless, and finally we end with an unfinished looking version of the post-wedding scene that lacks any of the weight it originally did. This probably should have been cut. OMS here is not great, but it does at least leave you with a taste of what a modern take on the film could look like. It leaves you daydreaming. A bigger base, a heavier military theme, a less campy tone. Going off your companion's dialogue, the night vision scene is meant to be maze-like and disorienting. It isn't, but the concept feels like a modernization of the more psychedelic side of OMS. You can picture this sort of being like a John Wick-like, stroby, flashy, visceral scene if it were in a Bond film, and despite this whole chapter being completely exhausting to actually play, it holds on to a focus that Goldfinger didn't, and it's at least some of the way towards coming together well. We then fast forward 20 years and 10 films to License to Kill in 1989, skipping over Roger Moore's entire tenure. For now. We'll get to Moonraker. With the Cold War beginning to come to an end at the time, the 007 films were facing a bit of an identity crisis. They were trying to carve out a way forward for Bond post-Cold War, and Timothy Dalton's second and final appearance as Bond in License to Kill is, as a result, grittier and more contemporary. It starts out very inspired by 80s cop thrillers. It's very Miami Vice. They up to the violence, a guy gets fed to a shark, and Bond's mission is to take down a drug empire of all things, led by Robert Davi's Franz Sanchez, one of the best Bond villains. Thankfully, his likeness is in Legends, alongside his henchman Benicio del Toro, a good get considering his profile, but he doesn't look quite right, not sure what's going on there. As the film progresses, it transitions further into the Bond we know, evil lair and all, but Dalton remains a more vulnerable and troubled Bond throughout, motivated by revenge more than duty. To me, this is a really refreshing take. The more I watch it, the more I enjoy it, the 80s vibes are everywhere, and it's cool to see Bond in more of a thriller, like we'd see in the Craig era. After a brief recreation of the scene where Felix Leiter's wife is found dead that almost goes for exactly 1 minute, wouldn't want the non-stop action to stop, and by the way, Felix is in this game, but it isn't Jeffrey Wright for some reason, like they could get Michael Lonsdale, but Wright's likeness was a bridge too far. Felix tells you to go after Franz Sanchez with the help of Pam Bouvier, who's actually voiced by Kerry Lowell, which you love to see, and suddenly the two of you are in a helicopter and Bond is attacking the base, I guess. We really do just like yada 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 entire films here.
His office is on the second floor. I'll keep him busy.
Poorly telling on Her Majesty's Secret Service or License to Kill stories especially is more clumsy than something like Die Another Day, because Bond in these movies is such a vulnerable character, motivated by his personal feelings. You know, you get the sense that Bond wouldn't bother attacking this drug empire if he wasn't miserable and after revenge, but here all of that is lost. It just devolves into campy nonsense, and at no point do you get the feeling that they even attempted to explore that side of things, which as a fan is pretty disappointing. It's the same with Tracy in OMS, or with the political intrigue strewn throughout Bond. Like, as silly as these films may seem, they are deliberately written to be steeped in real-world politics, but all of that is stripped away here in service of just dryly hitting basic story beats. We get a dart pen to help us with the stealthing, but it's very basic, and really the stealth itself is so basic. Like, enemies spot you really quickly, and it demands a lot of patience to get around them, and you can't move bodies, and if enemies see a body, they immediately know where you are somehow, so I don't know, you just shoot your way through, basically. Outside, the base kind of resembles the one in the film-ish, but inside, hey, guess what? It kind of looks like a sleek version of Facility from GoldenEye. You phone Exposition, the enemy office, you fight Benicio and throw him in the grinder, like in the movie, you save Pam, and you blow the place up. Standard stuff. Also, in one of my playthroughs, the game bugged and got stuck in slow motion for a few minutes. It's just that kind of game. I feel the need to mention that there's weapon upgrades and an experience points currency system and collectibles and side objectives and bonus objectives, all of which wouldn't be missed if they were gone. You find crates lying around and you click on those and you attach some COD attachments using a poorly designed menu. It's not worth the effort. I've mentioned it now so I can tick that off my to-do list. Where License to Kill finally surprises is with a driving sequence, which makes you wonder why Goldfinger and OMS didn't include their own car chases. It's slippery and unfinished, but a necessary palate cleanser from all the aim assist abuse, and as you jump onto Sanchez's semi-trailer and shoot from its roof before crashing and fighting Sanchez, there's a groundedness and a plainness to this sequence that clicks into the Daniel Craig aesthetic. Effectively, Craig is being thrown into a film that his are often compared to with this episode, and up until this point it hasn't really landed, but this sequence, from the military aesthetics to setting Sanchez alight, fits better. Like OMS, you can at least see a bit where they were going for with this and how it could have worked with Craig if it had more time to cook, so to speak.
You did all this for an American?
No. All this for my friend.
In 2002, my grandma took me to see Die Another Day when I was way too young for it because she was carefree and knew I loved 007. I have neighbours' copies of GoldenEye 64 to thank for that, and I don't think my parents were too happy. The first Bond film I saw in cinemas, it holds a special place for me, despite its many issues. This isn't a well-regarded film, it's full of contrivances, and it hasn't really been re-evaluated in much of a positive light, except maybe by people my age confessing their nostalgic love for it, which, if you'll allow me for a moment here, Die Another Day is such a vibrant, fun, and chaotic romp of a film. Brosnan is at his most confident, the supporting cast look like they're having a great time, the set design is insane, and the action is dynamic and inventive, sometimes in a bad way. See Bond riding a CGI tsunami, and overall, I think the very corny Die Another Day is super watchable if you find it more charming than grating. And what a film to transition into after License to Kill's gritty realism. Now we're in 007 Fantasyland with ice castles and invisible cars. It's impossible to imagine Daniel Craig in Die Another Day because Craig's Bond was on some level crafted specifically to bring everything back down to earth after Die Another Day got so out of hand, and yet here we are. When I first played 007 Legends, I was at this point completely numb to the game, you know, the endless sounds of gunfire, the bad shootouts, the constant redlining combat pace, and the swamps of enemies sent me into a lull. So by the time Die Another Day's game came around, the one I was looking forward to most, I instead tuned out. I want to emphasize just how bland these constant shootouts are. There's no enjoyable flow to them, and even though each episode is around 40 minutes long, these shootouts make them feel like they go on forever. The repetitive nature of it has you thinking about other things while playing it. It puts you into a numb haze. I know it doesn't need to be said at this point, but 007 Legends is a rough video game. So it wasn't until I played through Die Another Day a second time did I even properly register it, which is a shame because this is one of the bolder, less fillery efforts. Starting out at the Ice Castle, because skipping most of the films is a running theme now, I'm genuinely disappointed the North Korean hovercraft scene isn't here because it's wonderful. We instead have a very GoldenEye Wii style bar scene. The environment artists had fun here, it's radiant and campy in the spirit of the film, though those room names above the doors are a bit gamey and take you out of it, and in a rare moment the game gives you some much overdue time to take a look around and take it all in before you meet with Jinx. They didn't get Halle Berry's likeness, they instead used actress Gabriela Monteraz's likeness, who, according to completely unverifiable wiki pages with no sources, was apparently cast as Jinx in the film before Halle Berry replaced her. If anyone can find a source for that tidbit, please let me know. Oh, the joys of internet misinformation. I had a cameo in Quantum of Solace. She takes you to Graves' suite to do some phone exposition. Diamond Face Guy enters while you're in there. Remember him? Bond comments on it at full volume while they're leaving, and somehow they don't hear it.
Interesting way to wear diamonds.
We then cut to Gustav Graves' presentation, and Toby Stephens is kind of just going for it, like he did in the film. Like, whatever you think of this character, you've got to love Stephens' conviction playing him, and it's fun to see again.
I give you Icarus.
We then spend the majority of the chapter stealthing and shooting, and by stealthing I mean shooting, our way through the ice castle. It's the usual grading affair, like you wouldn't expect anything else, but the visual design here is at its most striking. Fireworks in the sky, the big dome garden thing, some early 2000s sci-fi offices. You fight Diamond Face in a recreation of that laser scene. Graves shows off his exoskeleton, and while it's all the usual rushed storytelling whiplash, at least it looks cool. You enter a lot of earlier areas in full stealth too, and I think the pacing of this level could have ramped up nicely if the stealth and combat were executed better. You shoot your way out of the castle and into your Aston Martin DBS. None of this purple ice world feels at all like a Craig film, by the way, and we're subject to another driving sequence where we get to avoid the satellite beams and chase down Diamond Face, like in the movie. It's slippery, frustrating nonsense, and it's funny how you can directly compare it to great ice driving sequences in prior Bond games like Bloodstone and Eurocom's own Nightfire, which came out 10 years earlier and pulled off a scene like this far more successfully. And that's kind of the thing with 007 Legends. You play through these scenes, they're not good, but you can often easily imagine how they could have been good. To end, we drive into a cargo ship with a borderline broken cargo dodging sequence, shoot our way through, and QTE fight an exosuit Gustav Graves, which kinda sounds fun on paper, but it isn't, you know? Aesthetically, it's all very evocative and campy like the film was, but actually playing it is fairly joyless. At least Toby Stephens is having fun. Finally, we get to Roger Moore's 1979 Moonraker, with no explanation given as to why it's the second last game, considering we've been chronological so far. I'll get to my theory on it. In fact, you never really get any explanation for anything happening at all in this game, ever, other than, like, I don't know, I guess Bond is hallucinating, so, you know, this is par for the course. I'd have loved it if each film at least had a title card, but maybe that was planned at some point. Moonraker is Bond in space, for better or worse. Amazing sets, a good villain, Jaws falls in love, it's spy camp through and through, and like Die Another Day, it's not particularly well liked, though it's a little more put together, and you'll probably see more fans call it underrated. I personally think it's fine, it's probably my least favourite featured film in this game, but it's fun, a pigeon does a double take, and if License to Kill was inspired by Miami Vice, Moonraker was obsessed with Star Wars, laser guns and all. Moonraker in this game, on the other hand, is far and away the best of the bunch, like almost inarguably, to the point where it's kind of shocking how much better it is. The little marketing this game had usually showed Moonraker. They announced the films in the game one by one, and Moonraker was first, and they showed off Moonraker and only Moonraker at E3 2012 with a few interviews insinuating that it was meant to be the first film that you'd play in the game. Maybe it was to get a demo ready for this E3, but for whatever reason, Moonraker, of all films, very clearly got far more attention than all the others. The early stages in Drax's spaceport initially has a like, here we go again with the slightly sci-fi themed facility level vibe to it, but no, the level evolves and changes aesthetically with well-paced story beats as you make your way through it. The enemy outfits are distinct and thoughtful, and their level placement isn't completely slapdash overwhelming nonsense. You run around with Holly Goodhead, they didn't get the likeness, figuring out Drax's plan, and interestingly, it doesn't take control away from you as much to force exposition upon you. You're in control of the game for a recreation of the poison gas scene. You run through the vents yourself to escape the blast chamber, and even the usually dull phone hacking exposition office scene is handled far more elegantly. The blinds open and a helicopter flies past, revealing a space shuttle, which acts as foreshadowing for an upcoming scene where you yourself fly past that shuttle in a chopper. The interactions with Jaws and Drax aren't gonna win any Oscars, but they're far more on beat, you know, like Drax descending down the stairs towards you, introducing himself while all his men hold you and Goodhead hostage is a cool, normal, followable moment that just isn't like the other chapters.
I suppose I should be flattered that MI6 would send such an experienced agent after Dr. Goodhead, Mr. Bond.
And then 80-ish-year-old Michael Lonsdale still had it, and even the moments between Bond and Goodhead are far more natural and fun, a far cry from the Pussy Galore stuff from earlier, and Jesus Christ, I can't keep saying these names with a straight face. This does a great job of introducing new and fun concepts as you go along too, like getting disguises with Goodhead, then finding and playing with the laser weapons, then finding your way into the space shuttle and flying into space. Look how good this space shuttle launch looks. It's ridiculous how much higher quality it is than everything else in this game, especially that on Her Majesty's Secret Service death scene, or OMS rather, sorry. And then in space, after the usual affair of shooting and stealthing, Moonraker has one last card to play. The gravity gets switched off, and suddenly you're flying around, sending ragdolls floating, and it's delightful. You enter a wing of the space station, see an exit that I initially thought was covered by a plane of glass, and the delight of floating out into the open space, flying around the station where the sound design washes out, was actually a pretty special moment. Now, just to temper things a bit, the stealth remains a frustrating mess, phone hacking remains incredibly dull, aiming itself is still awful. Like, it's not like the core mechanics change from movie to movie here, and combat sequences still tend to drag on longer than they should. But up until this point, you never got the sense that 007 Legends was having fun with its fun-sounding concept. It's come across as a game fulfilling a contract, basically. Except now, here in Moonraker. Moonraker has fun with it. Moonraker is a glimpse into what this game could have been. It's nothing mind-blowing, but it ends the game on a high, at least until you play the SKYFALL DLC. And that's why I think it's last, you know, like, it seems that at some point someone decided that it should be the big finale, and you can't blame them. 007 Legends was pulled from digital stores in January of 2013, only 3 months after the game came out, which is tragic and telling. Activision's license agreement expired, so they also pulled all their other 007 games too, and with that, the SKYFALL DLC was also pulled, lasting less than 2 months, where the only way to play it now is on the Wii U of all consoles, the version you've been seeing in this video, which released in December of 2012 and included the SKYFALL DLC on the disc. The digital future is fun, isn't it? In short, this episode is terrible. Competing with GOLDFINGER for the worst of the bunch, it's a few minutes of bad rooftop shootouts, a few minutes of frustrating, clunky bike chase that sort of mirrors the skiing from OMS, and a few minutes of the dullest bullet sponge boss battles. It's incredibly short. I was hoping 007 Legends would have a non-QTE boss, but be careful what you wish for, I guess. It all does sort of look like the film, you know, it's not ugly, but there's no Javier Bardem, none of Skyfall's richness. This doesn't even have the usual Cliff Notes exposition dumps. It's just a final whimper from a studio on the verge of closing. I invited a couple of friends over to subject them to 007 Legends, and it seems like the multiplayer mode is passable. Lots of it is lifted from GoldenEye Wii's competent multiplayer, but with Legends' clunkier controls. The online is down and hasn't been fan-revived like GoldenEye. Shocking, I know. Though you can LAN tunnel it on PC if you like, but then you have to deal with the PC's mouse input issues, which you really don't want to do. And these maps are clearly balanced for 12 online players rather than me and 2 confused friends. They're very big, so it's hard to get a real sense of what this mode was properly like, but researching it online, it seems like it was hard to find a match even around release. Shocking, I know. My friends and I did find some amusement in the Wii U's 2 exclusive modes though, which has one player using the gamepad, trying to complete objectives while the others hunt them down. The Wii U was an unusual console. There's also some concept art, bonus content stuff on the main menu I feel I should mention, which is unremarkable, but, you know, welcome enough. Playing 007 Legends, I kept thinking about Atari 50, the anniversary celebration, another game that celebrated the 50-year anniversary of a pop culture brand, and while it may look like your bog-standard retro game collection on the surface, it contextualizes the games in it with behind-the-scenes documents, photos, fun facts, and even interviews with the developers. It's like an interactive documentary, and its developers, Digital Eclipse, even developed a handful of modern reimaginings of Atari games and put them in there. It's fun to daydream about what a 007 video game collection in the same vein would look like, but considering the nightmare it was to get GoldenEye 64 alone re-released, that's absolutely a pipe dream. It's a shame too because EA's Bond games were prolific, but their popularity isn't as felt now because they don't get re-released or followed up like other franchises do, and because 007 is no longer a strong video game brand, something that Activision and 007 Legends are partly responsible for, with 007 Legends still being the most recent major Bond game as of January 2024. Interestingly, there are little nods to Bond's video game heritage in Legends. There's a classic health mode you can play the game with instead of regenerating health that makes it all very easy and shows those round health and armor bars like in GoldenEye. There's bonus objectives for higher difficulties like in GoldenEye, and you can pick Bond characters in the multiplayer, again like in GoldenEye, but these features were also in GoldenEye Wii, so they were kind of just carried forward. I bring up Atari 50 because it's the context around the games that are often more valuable than the games themselves. I don't get a lot of joy out of playing Atari 2600 games, but Hearing the crazy stories about how they were made and then playing them is a delightful experience. 007 Legends effectively fails to contextualize its levels. You could play through this game without even learning the names of these films if you didn't know, but had they introduced each film, even shared set photos and the stories of how they were made, and then said, hey, here's a modern reimagining we've put together if you're interested, that alone would skyrocket this game into something special, I think, flaws and all. Which is why in this video I've gone on tangents to make sure to properly introduce each film and talk about why I love this series so much. My goal here was to bring more depth and intrigue to a game in desperate need of both by contextualizing it with its franchise that has such a rich legacy. I wish 007 Legends itself did the same, but with how its development went, it doesn't seem like it ever had a chance. You hear a lot in game development that projects come together at the last minute or in the final months. A game can be broken, unfun, unplayable, or unrecognizable just months before release, until it often gets crunched together at the cost of its developers' health and well-being. From what it sounds like, 007 Legends had all the crunch, but wasn't afforded the final months, or maybe years, it demanded, and so it never had the luxury of coming together, with the final game feeling like an unfun, cynical product. A dour reflection on Activision, maybe, from all the developers on the Bond games that I've spoken to over the years, or from those who've left comments on my videos. It sounds like Activision are absolutely to blame, but whatever happened, it's a shame Eurocom couldn't meaningfully build upon the groundwork their GoldenEye remake laid. It's a shame too that the good work and kernels of cool ideas or moments in 007 Legends aren't capitalized on, and it's the biggest shame that Eurocom shut down almost immediately after this came out, marking the end of the quality British devs' 24-year run. Bizarre Creations were also shut down after 007 Bloodstone, which digs the knife deeper. Hitman's developer, IO Interactive, are working on the first major Bond game since Legends, which sounds very promising, but as it stands, from the potential it didn't achieve to the negative impact on 007 as a gaming IP to Eurocom's demise, the legacy of 007 Legends is a sad one, but hey, at least we got that Moonraker low gravity level. And there we wrap up the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. This marks the end of the Craig games, so I've kind of covered each one. I also did a video on the PS2 port of Quantum of Solace if you're interested. There are other Craig games that I haven't talked about, like Bloodstone and GoldenEye are on DS, and Quantum of Solace is on Wii, so, you know, maybe I should wrap up, maybe I should just, for finality's sake, do quick videos on those. But my plan now with the 007 series is to go back and do the Brosnan games, because as I talked about in this video, I think that EA's Pierce Brosnan games are really quite something special. Everything or Nothing is an amazing game. The Redwood Shores games are amazing. Nightfire is really cool. From Russia with Love with Sean Connery exists, which is kind of cool in and of itself. So I think they're worth talking about. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe, you know, do all this stuff. It helps. And I've got a Patreon if you want to financially support me. Send me money and I will happily accept it. And thank you to the patrons coming up on the screen, and goodbye.